So, you probably didn't see this one coming. We're going to dig into a political battle that's raging not on the world stage, but inside the official documents of the US State Department. And believe it or not, the weapon of choice here, it's the humble typeface.
It sounds a little wild, doesn't it? But really, how can a font become a political statement? Well, that's the big question we're tackling today. Because this isn't just about what looks nice on a page. It's about ideology, it's about tradition, and it's about accessibility, all wrapped up in the choice between two fonts.
All right, let's meet our two contenders. On the left, you've got Times New Roman. You know it, it's the long-standing classic. And on the right, you've got Calibri. It's more modern-looking replacement. Now get this, in a pretty dramatic reversal, the State Department just switched back to Times New Roman after adopting Calibri only last year. And the why behind that flip-flop, well, that's really the heart of this whole story.
Okay, so to really get what this fight is all about, we first have to understand the basic difference between these two fonts. It all comes down to a tiny little design detail that, as it turns out, signals two very, very different ways of thinking.
First up is the serif font, and Times New Roman is the perfect example. You see those little feet or flourishes at the ends of the letters? Yeah, those are serifs. Their origins stretch way, way back to Roman antiquity, and they're often seen as communicating tradition, formality, and a sense of ceremony.
And on the other hand, we have sans serif, which literally just means without serif. As you can see, fonts like Calibri are clean, no extra flourishes. They're generally seen as more modern, more straightforward, and for a lot of people, just plain easier to read, especially on screens. So with that difference in mind, let's rewind the clock to early 2023. Back then, the State Department decided it was time for a big change. They were ditching their longtime standard for something brand new.
And you can see the turbulence right here on this timeline. For almost 20 years, Times New Roman was the law of the land. Before that, it was Courier New. But this really quick flip from Times New Roman to Calibri and then immediately back again, that's where a simple design choice turns into a political football.
Now, that 2023 switch to Calibri wasn't just some random decision. No, it was a very deliberate move, and it was recommended by the department's own Office of Diversity and Inclusion. The whole goal was to make official documents more accessible for people with disabilities, think low vision or dyslexia, and for those who use screen readers. And for that, the move was widely praised by accessibility advocates. Which brings us to today and the memo that really kicked off this whole conflict. Just recently, the current Secretary of State sent out a department-wide memo, and the subject line said it all: return to tradition.
So the main reason given for switching back to Times New Roman? It was framed as a matter of aesthetics and, well, seriousness. The memo argues that Calibri is just too informal and that the classic serif font is what's needed to restore decorum and professionalism to the department's work.
But the memo went a lot further than that. It actually took a direct shot at the reason for the original change. It called the switch to Calibri a wasteful sop to diversity and accessibility programs. So it framed the font not as a tool for inclusion, but as a symptom of a political agenda that the current leadership opposes.
And the new directive was incredibly specific. It wasn't just a return to Times New Roman, it also mandated a return to a 14-point font size. This reversed another accessibility-focused change from last year, which had bumped the size up to 15-point just to make things a little easier to read. So yeah, it's pretty clear this isn't really about fonts. This is a proxy war. The choice between Calibri and Times New Roman has become a symbol for two completely different visions of what the State Department should be prioritizing and what it should represent to the world. I mean, the divide just couldn't be clearer. On one side, you've got Calibri, which stands for a push towards modernity and accessibility, and it's framed as inclusive and progressive. On the other side, Times New Roman stands for tradition and formality, and it's being framed as a return to professionalism and conservative values. You've got two fonts representing two completely different worldviews. It really leaves you with a fascinating question, right? When a choice that seems as small as a typeface can get loaded with so much political meaning, it really makes you wonder, what other simple, everyday details of our lives are actually silent battlegrounds for much, much bigger ideas?